All right, we'll be going in just one moment here.
Our pods have kept us going this past year. We aren't the only ones who thrive together and rely on our pods. The Salish Sea is home to the Southern Resident Orcas, who eat together, play together, and enjoy each other's company. Our Southern Resident Orcas need our help. With dwindling salmon runs, pollution, and ship noise in their home waters, it's time for us to take action. So this Orca Month, join us for online events. Let's celebrate with our pods while protecting theirs. Join our events throughout the month of June. Visit www.orcamonth.com to find out more about Orca Month.
You're muted, Susan.
Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. There may still be a few people logging on while we're doing the intros. I'm Susan Berta with Orca Network, and I also work with the Penn Cove Water Festival since 1992, and we're happy to be co-hosting this event today. I first want to introduce some of our staff who are helping out. Cindy Hansen, and there's Vicki Reyes from the Penn Cove Water Festival. There's Cindy Hansen, our Orca Network Education Coordinator. Katie Watkins, our Langley Whale Center Manager, who's helping us out. And Amanda Colbert, our Education Assistant. Cindy and Amanda, well, everyone this month has been really busy, especially Cindy and Amanda with Orca Month activities all month long during June. They've done an incredible job of many events. They've been helping coordinate for all of the Orca Salmon Alliance, who co-sponsors Orca Month. We have our 2-day event this weekend, and we have one more youth activity that Orca Network is sponsoring this Wednesday. We've been doing those every week all month long, and then a closing event on Wednesday for Orca Month as well. And then lots of naps on July 1st, I'm sure. That it's been a wonderful Orca Month, and we were so excited to be doing this event today. I'm going to let our Zoom queens talk a little bit about some of the logistics of the chat and different options you have during the Zoom.
Yeah, so just a couple of things today, a little housekeeping for Zoom today. We aren't going to have an official Q&A, but if you do have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. A lot of these videos are recorded beforehand, so we don't have the people there to answer them, but we might be able to answer your questions. For any of the videos that we show today, if we have the entire video on here today, they will be on Orca Network's YouTube channel, so you can find them there. If we're not showing the entire video today, we will post the links to those videos in the chat. And also, you might have noticed you have a closed captioning option today. So on the bottom of your screen, that'll be under live transcript, and you can turn that off or on by clicking on live transcript, and you can either click hide subtitle or show subtitle, depending on your preference. And I think that's it. Enjoy your day, guys.
Thanks so much. So those three will be behind the scenes doing incredible technical stuff, and hopefully we'll be keeping things running smoothly, and we will make it through the high temperatures, and there won't be any power outages. and we'll have a great day together. I want to start just with welcoming everybody for taking a part out of this beautiful day and weekend to be with us. And I'll start with an acknowledgement of the lands and waters that we all inhabit are part of the Salish Sea that for many, many generations has been inhabited by the Coast Salish people and is theirs. So we honor them and the history and their lands and waters and their stewardship of our resources and their connection to it. We really, for decades, have worked with many of the regional tribes and just really honor and value their generations of knowledge. They have lived on these lands and waters for many generations and know a lot more about them than any of us. So we have a lot to learn and are doing this event in the spirit of working together in the stewardship of this beautiful place that we're all lucky enough to call home. Also recognizing that since we're doing this via Zoom, some of you aren't lucky enough to live here, but wherever you live, there are histories of Indigenous people who were there before you. So we just ask that everybody honor that. I also just want to take a moment where we all take a deep breath and think about the losses of this last year or two. And I know many of the tribal communities have really suffered from COVID, and many elders have been lost. So there are many communities who are in mourning at this time. So we will just take a moment to honor the spirits of all those who have passed. And we'll be talking about some other things that have been happening in recent weeks later in the morning. But one of the reasons that we're doing this event, it's something I've wanted to do for many years. I was dreaming it as a live event, and that hasn't happened. And this year, when the Penn Cove Water Festival had to be canceled for 2 years in a row, and we were all missing our friends who we get to see every year in Coopville for the canoe races and the performances and the storytelling, we decided let's do this event now with the water festival. And the whole purpose behind it is to look at how the Northwest icons of the salmon and the orcas, they're so central to the native culture, and how salmon are central to the orca, the Southern Resident Orca culture. You know, both the native tribes and the orca pods follow the salmon. They survive because of the salmon, and they are all hurting because of the loss of salmon. And the orca is very important in all native cultures as well. So we just wanted to do an event that kind of brings all that together, and also gives us some ideas and hopes and inspiration for how we can work together in the future to help our salmon and our orca, who are the lifeblood of the Pacific Northwest. So we're going to start with a blessing by Rosie Caillou James and Bill Bailey from the Samish Nation, who have been a part of the Water Festival events and many Orca Network events for years. So we will play that for you now.
I've been honored once again this year to be an opener for the Orca Networks and for the orcas. You know that what we have out here is the kingdom of orcas, the kingdom of our ancestors. I want to sing a song for our ancestors here on this beautiful island of Lopez, which a lot of orcas call home as well. We wonder, where do they call home? They're like us. They have gathering villages. They have family to visit. So I'm going to sing a song to invite their spirits all over here. Invite their spirits into the bay here. Ask them to come and be one together with us on the sacred day that we honor them. The Lummies, Tlalops, Swinomish, Kikialis, and the Mitchell Bay, Upper Skagit, they're all connected to orcas. All the Coast Salish are connected. Over on the coast, the peninsula, all connected to orcas. All the wildlife are connected to the orcas. Okay, I will sing this here song. That's some of what we hold on to. We hold on to that in our life about how to take care of one another. How do the orcas take care of us? We don't know, but we know that they take care of us more. Let me put it this way, they take care of us more than we know. They gather us. They help heal us. They send us spiritual energy from the sacred water. There's so much more you can add to what it means to be an instrument for their knowledge. I am very happy to do this on Lopez Island. I want to thank Madrona for inviting me here today. Thank Cindy for being here, and thank Ken for being here. Aiska.
Okay, I think we'll go on to, let's see, Amanda, do you have, why don't we go on to the Orca Network video? And then we're going to start by just a little bit of information about each of our co-host groups. So we'll have a short video about Orca Network, and then we'll do one about the water festival that Vicki Reyes will introduce. Okay, next I have the pleasure of introducing Vicki Reyes, who was Penn Cove Water Festival president for many years, is still very active, and has kept the tradition going. I'm so thankful for all her hard work and efforts and community connections. She's going to introduce this next wonderful video about the water festival.
Hi, I'm Vicki Reyes, and as Susan said, past president, but currently secretary for the Penn Cove Water Festival Association. Our current president, Nina Godot, was unable to join us at this time, so I have the pleasure of talking about the festival and introducing the next film. Our mission is to continue the tradition of the canoe racing in historic Coopeville by bringing families together to enjoy Native American canoe racing, entertainment, arts and crafts, and the culture, and bringing them a chance to learn about and appreciate our environment and protect it, which is so important to both the salmon and the orcas. Hopefully we'll see you again next May 14th, 2022 for a live festival. The original races started in the 1930s when local businessmen invited Native American tribes to come race again on Penn Cove. The first festival had 3 11-man canoes, but over the years we would have up to 22 Native tribes from Pacific Northwest as well as BC. The festival ended during World War II and was not revived until 1992 when the Beach Watchers organization, whose executive director at that time was Susan Berta, revived the festival and brought it back as the Penn Cove Water Festival. That's renaming from Coopeville Water Festival. They formed a nonprofit in 2004. And then in 2010, they kind of needed to retire. So a new group of board members was brought on to ensure the continuance of the festival. And we had our first festival under the logo of, or title of The Legacy of Whidbey Island, reflecting the Native tribes that were had continuously occupied this area for centuries. So at that time, we were in need of generating some funds to resurrect or keep the festival going and raise awareness of the festival. At that time, Native American Swill Canum, who had been one of our entertainers for many years and was a great supporter of Penn Cove Water Festival, had his team from Honor Works put together a wonderful film about the festival for a Kickstarter, which more than met our goals. You can find out more about Swill Canum, our other entertainers, the history of the festival, the arts and crafts on our website, excuse me, at penncovewaterfestival.com. So now I'd like to let the film take over, and please enjoy this film. And we thank Swill Canum with all our hearts.
Festival is important to me because it gives both Native Americans and non-Native Americans an opportunity to come together for a day to share culture, particularly for the Caucasian or the non-Native tribal folks. Gives them an opportunity to learn more about the tribal nations, particularly the Coast Salish that we have here in Northwest Washington.
But then again, this community, this little town, this little community, they come together, they put this cool little event on. It's free, everybody comes, and when the weather's great, it's awesome. And I just meet so many great people, and people are so kind.
I think the festival is important for the community because it helps bring tourists into the area, and it helps our merchants, our local merchants. But it also brings the coastal tribes back to their native land. And I feel very strongly that it's good for them to come back to their heritage and to their land here, the land that was once theirs.
When the community gets together, I mean, they can do some really neat things. And once again, this event, brings the community together. And then you have, the young people that have never been exposed to, cultural music and dance. You might see it in a book, you might see it in a video. You can come here and, and everybody, it's, how should I say, intertribal. Because to quote my friend Gene Tagaman, we're all tribal people.
My involvement with the Penn Cove Water Festival, from my personal standpoint, just brings me closer to the tribal folks, and that's very meaningful for me. It's a very spiritual experience for me.
For thousands of years, Northwest natives have used cedar canoes to traverse Puget Sound and the rivers that flow into it. Among the many types of canoes developed over hundreds of years, some were used for racing. The men shown in these 1930s news films of the water festival had probably canoed all night before reaching Coopville in the early morning, then raced into Penn Cove all that day. Slim and sleek, they sped through the water powered solely by up to 11 pullers. A family or tribe's honor was bound up in the strength of the men in a canoe. 3 11-man canoes participated in the first water festival. Later, up to 22 tribes attended, with most joining in the races. They continued this tradition until 1942 because of the Second World War. However, in 1991, a group of Whidbey Islanders revived the Penn Cove Water Festival and continue to host the modern event today.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Vicki. And thanks to Swill Keenum for not only the beautiful video, but for his many, many years of performance. I still remember the first time he played back when he was still Richard Marshall, the name that was given to him by our society. And he came and played up in the park. And it was just so incredible. And there were eagles flying right above the stage as he played. And it was just one of those moments. And he's been back, I think, every year since, and has also played at some of our events. And just wonderful guy who is right now out camping, hopefully somewhere cool and enjoying the mountains. And thank you, Vicki, and to all the Penn Cove Water Festival Association for keeping the tradition going. Someday, I hope I will retire a bit and be able to help more than I am. But I sure miss helping with the canoe races and seeing everybody. So let's hope for May 2022.
Well, we thank you for being the spearhead of reviving this festival and all your support. And thank you for asking us to join you in this, excuse me, in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And for those who want to learn more, just go to penncovewaterfestival.com or follow our Facebook page. And we think the 2022 festival may be May 14th. We have to base it on tides, and that's the only decent tide, barely decent, in May on a Saturday. So hope we can all enjoy it live then. Thank you. So now we have a great short video audio from Rosie Caillou James with some of her recollections about what the water festival means to her, and just about Penn Cove and her ancestors. Just some wonderful reminiscing that we'll play for you next.
Penn Cove Water Festival. It brings me home to that cove where my dad loved so much to visit the spirits. Even before my dad knew where the spirits were, where they were going to be. My dad never pretended to be anybody. My dad called himself a man without a country. And I truly believe that that was the orca in him talking. A man without a country, an orca without a country. Brings me back to 1970, the day that I brought my dad out there to visit the water spirits as he always had. And that day, that one day that we decided to go out there is when they were hoisting the pods onto to take them to Florida. And my dad sat on the beach and had his arms crossed, he had one leg over the log like this. And he was watching, and there was tears just coming out of his eyes. And he was speaking to them. He was speaking to them and telling them, we'll come and set you free. We'll come. That's my promise to you. Then my dad died. And my promise to him was to keep working for his family. So the Penn Cove Water Festival every year is not just about canoes and people, celebration. It's about ancestors and orcas as well.
Sorry about the video or the audio on that. That's why they put captions on it, but we didn't think it was going to be quite that quiet. So apologies for that. There's always going to be some technical glitch, and let's hope that's it for the day. Thank you to Rosie for doing that. I think now we're going to show another video that is of Peter Ali, who was in the Honor Works video, and we'll be hearing some of his flute music throughout the 2 days. He's another longtime water festival performer who has agreed to be part of our event, and just beautiful music. So we'll play one of his next.
Hello there, my name is Peter Ali. I am a Native American flautist, or flute player if you will. And I live here in Bellingham, Washington, and I love to share my music. It's all about healing. I'm going to play a variety of some songs for you, and with a few different flutes. This one is a flute, one of my favorites. It's our Tlinket style carving on the end of a contemporary Native American style flute. It is from a children's story that was told, I heard the first time from a friend by the name of Gene Tagline. And it is how Raven stole the sun. That is what he has in his beak there. Not a seed or a rock or anything, but the sun. So let me play you a song for Raven.
I am. They said the most uttered words these last 2 months or 2 years is "you are muted," and I was. Such beautiful music. And that brings us to the history, the way back history of the water festival and the canoe races. Thanks to Rick Castellano and Indy, the techno video whiz at the Island County Historical Society Museum in Coopville. They made this and several other videos. The next one, the one we're going to see now, is the Snakelam canoe and about the canoe culture of the Northwest. The museum in Coopville has some wonderful exhibits, some of which you will see during this event this weekend. And if you're ever in Coopville, it's a wonderful place to visit. Here is a glimpse into the history of our canoe culture here on Penn Cove.
Hi everyone, I'm Rick Castellano, the Executive Director of the Island County Museum. I know I'm not the only one missing yet another year of the world-famous Water Festival. Back when it officially started in 1930, the festival was wildly popular and featured in movie theater newsreels for several years running. It took World War II to interrupt this wonderful event in 1942, and 50 years later, the Water Festival returned every year until 2020. And then it took a pandemic to suspend it once again, which shows you just how much we all love this very special annual race. I'm proud to say our Island County Museum cares for 4 former Water Festival canoes. We are honored with this responsibility, and we hope to keep them accessible to many generations to come. So let's all look forward to 2022 and to watching these graceful canoes return once again to race on the waters of Penn Cove. Okay, the canoe tradition or canoe culture has been around for many, many centuries and multiple generations, time immemorial. That's probably the best way to describe it. But these canoes were created for a special purpose, and not for transportation, but for racing. And it was a source, and still is a source, of tribal pride and competition for the youth primarily. And so these are still traditionally carved cedar dugout canoes. And we're standing right now in front of one of the most famous ever made, the Telegraph. It's 51 feet long. It's an 11-person canoe. Men or women race these. And the Telegraph was built in 1905 by Andrew Joe and a Mr. Edwards, both from the Swinomish tribe, hand-carved. And it won just about every race it was ever in. And if you look closely at the thickness of the hull, you'll see one of the reasons that it was so fast. It's very, very thin. There are, the hull, I would guesstimate, just from feeling it, is about a ½ inch thick of cedar. So a cedar tree carved down to a ½ inch thick over 50 feet long is quite an achievement. And but it also spells retirement for some of these old canoes, because it's gotten so thin to make it so fast that it's pretty fragile at this point. But this came to Coopville. It was given to the town by the people, the racers, back in the 1930s. And that's one of the reasons we have this long canoe shed to keep them in. The one directly above it, the Flying Cloud, is another about a 50-footer, 11-person canoe. And this was carved by Howard Tom and Ronald Tom of the Upper Skagit native tribe up in Skagit Valley. And it was carved in about 1930, so it's one of the newer ones. It was very popular and winner in annual canoe races here until about 1942, and that's when the Water Festival kind of closed up for World War II and didn't come back for another 50 years. In the early 40s, this is a kind of an interesting story. Harry Race, who was a native Whidbey Islander and a prominent pharmacist, up in Alaska. He felt the Alaskan natives should have their own racing canoe. So he traveled all the way to La Conner, and he bought the Flying Cloud from the Swinomish tribe. The Ketchikan natives, however, were not interested in racing the dugout, and the Flying Cloud ended up being stored in Ketchikan, where it stayed for several years. But then in 1951, some native folks from Bow were given permission to race the Flying Cloud in the Lummi Regatta up near Bellingham. And so from Alaska, the canoe was shipped to Bow and ready to race at Lummi. And then, unfortunately, the natives from Bow decided not to race after that. So it was sent to Swinomish tribal community in La Conner, where it was stored. And then several years later, Ted Christensen got the blessing of Charlotte Race, Harry Race's widow, and the Swinomish tribe to add Flying Cloud to the museum's collections. Start here and talk a little bit about the water festival. Do away with that. Okay. So the precursor to the Penn Cove Water Festival was I guess originally it was called the Indian Water Carnival. And the first races that we had here in Penn Cove of these native canoes were in 1929. The first official water festival was held in 1930. And we are very honored here in Coopville to host these races every year in May. This is the only non-reservation site where native pullers come and race. And so we're quite honored to do that. It started in 1930 as kind of a promotional event for Coopville, sponsored by local businessmen, headed up by Wiley Hesselgrave. And but it's really it was very popular, hugely popular, until 1942, and World War II came along, and the races were suspended, and they were suspended for 50 years. They came back in 1992, and now it's an annual occurrence in normal years, an annual occurrence in May. And but it's really become a multicultural event, and everyone looks forward to it every year, and it's a great event. So these two canoes, the Elson and the Tillicum, were carved by a local Lower Skagit carver, Alec Kettle. He was the last of the Lower Skagit people to live and die here in Coopville, and he was quite a skilled carver. This, the Elson, he had a son named Elson. I'm pretty sure that was named after him. But this was used in an event at the Water Festival that was kind of like a jousting competition, where native paddlers, one native paddler would stand up in this little tiny canoe and come head on at another paddler or puller, and they would try to knock each other over, and whoever stayed upright won the race. And when you look at this, it would be hard enough just to sit in it without tipping it over, because there's only maybe 7 or 8 inches of freeboard here. It's pretty amazing, but it's also a dugout. And below the Elson is the Tillicum. The Tillicum was another specialty event canoe, and this one would be, they called it a log jumping event. And canoes or large logs would be anchored in the out in Penn Cove, and the race course went in a circle and crossed the logs, I believe, twice. And to cross a log, there were 2 people in the canoe, 2 paddlers or pullers, as they call them. they would shift their weight to the back of the canoe to get the bow up on top of the log. And then as soon as it was on top of the log and they got about halfway over the log, paddling as hard as they could, they would shift their weight to the front, to the bow, and slide over the log. And they would have to, whoever finished the course first would win the race. Unfortunately, that tradition went away with the new water festival, so they're not doing that, but that makes these extremely rare. They were very purposely built. So these are a collection of our racing canoes. They were all given to the museum. Actually, they were given to the town of Coopville in appreciation for hosting the water festival every year. And so we have a close relationship, particularly with the Swinomish tribe, because they represent the Lower Skagit people who are indigenous to this area. So we're very honored to have these here. And like their other canoes, these are kind of like part of their families. They're like. So we hope you'll come and visit the Island County Museum in Coopville, right downtown on the waterfront. We're open every day of the year. We have a wonderful Native People, Native Places exhibit in our ground floor of the museum. And you can see the other 4 Native canoes in our collection, along with the 4 Water Festival canoes.
Little preview of what's to come there. Thanks again to Rick and Indy for that great video and little history of the water festival, canoe races. I am going to do just a short slideshow about the current water festival canoe races. Get rid of this screen. Okay. So as Rick said, the original water festivals started in the 1930s. This does not want to. We started the races again in 1992. Bringing them back to Penn Cove. You can see a lot of Coopville hadn't changed that much. And it was so great to see the canoes on Penn Cove again. So every May, it's just been a wonderful tradition to see all these big canoes arriving into town and driving down Main Street and making this jigsaw puzzle of trucks and huge long canoes in the parking lot at the boat ramp. Sadly, the 2019 it was the last races due to COVID, and we're hoping next year to start again. I just love watching the canoes come in, and they're just, each one is a work of art. They're so beautiful. The Water Festival Association worked with community members to make these great canoe racks for the smaller canoes, which were so wonderful. Some of the tribes wanted them and they gave some to some of the tribes as well, but it really helped with some of the congestion in our little parking lot there. So they take the canoes off the trucks, carry them to the water. After Gary Pizon, who's here today, does a great captain's meeting. We go through the effort to register everybody, and the Water Festival provides t-shirts to everyone. Then, so they carry the canoes down the boat ramp, and these canoe pullers are of all ages. We have from the junior buckskins up to 11 man and woman canoes. So all sizes of canoes and people, and everybody helps. Carrying the paddles is a big job too, sometimes for a little person. So it's great when it's a nice hot day like this. So here's a picture of one of the larger canoes. It is just so amazing to see the work that these teams put into it. They practice and practice starting in the late winter, early spring. And then they have races every single weekend all around Washington and British Columbia. Sadly, with the border closed, that's impossible right now. There's some single canoes, and there's one of my favorite double canoes, and probably the youngest canoe puller I've seen out on the races course. And we have 6-person canoes, and each category of canoes, we have the youngest kids, the juniors, and then women's and men's. With doubles, we do a mixed doubles. And I just love the sight of the canoes on the cove. You can see some years the weather is not ideal. And what is incredible is we have safety boats out there to help as needed. I think only once in all the decades I've been doing this, maybe twice, has any puller let themselves be rescued and taken back to the dock. If a canoe dumps over, which happens quite often, they all right the canoe and get back in, from the oldest to the youngest. And we've had some years where it was really rough waters, and our safety personnel and we get a little nervous, and they're like refusing help until they know they really can't get back in. They are amazing. They've trained for this, and they are just amazing athletes who've done this for many decades and centuries and generations. The Island County Museum has joined in by making cedar paddles and ribbons for the winners. We also make winner certificates with the year's logo. One of my favorite things about the festival is Jim and Jim, who have been our announcers since day one. Jim Freeman on the left is a local conductor of fun MC person who is always great at announcing, and Jim Hilaire, or Uncle Smitty as he's known by many, just a beautiful man who we love dearly. I had found a video of him and his wife Ludi singing and drumming 2 nights ago, and then I cannot find it. So sadly, I can just share the memory of that. But he and his beautiful wife Ludi there watching the races, along with many other people. It's just, I really encourage people who visit the water festival to come down to the boat launch, because it's a whole different part of the festival. The festival downtown is wonderful, and it has music and vendors and food and all kinds of great things. But the canoe race central is at the boat launch, and Gary and I are there, and Rick from the museum. We keep things running, and the winners also get cash prizes. So we work hard to make sure we, get the right winners and get the money and the certificates and the prizes to them. And it's been amazing for me to see from the beginning in the early 90s, some of the kids that were little, or the launching of a canoe that was just built, and watch them grow up, and now their kids are racing, which is just an amazing thing for me, except it makes me feel old. It's just, there's just no sight like it. And It's hard for me to leave the canoe races and go see the rest of the festival, which I also love, but it's just, there's such a fun spirit at the races. So we hope that next May, probably May 14th, you can come to Coopville on Whidbey Island and see the water festival and see the races. And I wanted to point out, this is a canoe paddle that was given to me by one of the pullers, canoe club captains, as a gift. And the paddles themselves are a work of beauty and art and function, as well as the canoes. So if you have a chance, once the canoe races get started again, they happen all over the Northwest and in other areas as well, in Hawaii and other countries. So it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. So I just encourage you to go see them whenever you have a chance. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little. We've given you a lot of history about the two organizations who are hosting this event, and we appreciate your patience in learning more about us. It gives some background about why we're passionate about the Coast Salish culture and about orcas and salmon. Next, we have a short video introduction. We'll have more video tomorrow. The Lummi House of Tears carvers, Jewel James and Doug James, have been doing totem journeys for many years. A few years ago, they did a Tokitai totem pole for Lolita in Miami and took it all the way to Miami and back. And they have amazing events all along the route. So this year they are on another totem journey, the Red Road to DC. And this totem is a thank you to President Biden, who is changing some things for the better for our tribes. And they are, where are they, Howie? They were in Miami and headed north. No, they were headed from Miami to Kansas. Yeah, and then, so they're gonna get to DC. But here's a short video kind of showing what they have done so far, and we'll have more of this tomorrow.
For the last 20 years, the House of Tears carvers of the Lummi Nation have transported totem poles around the world as a way of bringing communities together and highlighting issues. This year is our biggest journey yet. A large coalition of Indigenous and non-Indigenous groups have gathered and supported this project, where we're driving a 25-foot totem pole across the country, stopping at many sacred and historic places under threat from dams, climate change, and resource extraction. As the totem pole moves, it carries the spirits of the land it visits. It's like a battery that charges as it travels. As people touch it, they give it power. As it moves on, it shares that power with the next community it visits. This totem pole draws lines of connection between communities fighting for the land and for the future, and against an understanding of development that has been pushing the world towards extinction. The journey will end in Washington, D.C., where it will be delivered to the Biden administration as a strong and important message. It's a reminder of the promises that were made to the first peoples of these lands and waters. and to the responsibility we all share to safeguard the sacred sources of life, earth, water, sky, for the generations to come.
Sorry. So you can also find out more about that on Facebook. And sacredsea.org is another great website where you can see footage from other totem journeys and follow the current one. The totem poles are so powerful. When people, every stop, people just come and put their hands on the totem, and the energy and the prayers, and every time the tears just flow. It's just hard to describe that experience. So again, if you ever have that opportunity to be at one of these totem events, I highly recommend it. It's a very moving experience. So this workshop was going to mainly be about orcas and salmon and native cultures and how salmon are central to these cultures. But there have been more and more injustices coming to light in recent weeks. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those. We had planned to show this next video with the late Chief Bill James, hereditary chief of the Lummi, who also, he and his mother used to come and do their cedar weaving at the Penn Cove Water Festivals from at the very beginning. Just such a wonderful man, and such a great loss to all. But he filmed this short video about the Quahomicton and about Scully-Choctano, which is Scully-Choctanot, sorry, who is Lolita Tokitai, the whale of many names, who was captured here in Penn Cove. So we'll start this next section, which is about the journey of the Indigenous people in some of what they are going through and what they've been through. They're still going through today, but this little video kind of shows some of the parallels and how it connects to our orcas as well.
I was raised with lots of old people. I knew lots of old people in my day, and they talked about Quahomicton. Achansasan, it's a Flamichasan Kalat. Gansa Salo, Quanasan Attachal, Tlutsan Attack. He Achansa Squiam, it's a Quahomicton, Taskano, he's Tashquiam, it's a Flami. An elder came to my house. He came right in, he sat down. I come to tell you a story of your people. And he said, you remember this now, the story of Quahomicton, the blackfish or the killer whale. And it's a long story, but they come from the people that live under the water. And a young man went down and he saw the people that lived under the water. But everything in creation are all our brothers and sisters and our relatives. That's why we have to respect everything. That's why we give thanks to everything that we eat, everything that we do, because we all know that they come from people at one time, and they're our relatives. Coast Salish was taken away off to Florida, and it's kind of like our people. When the government and the church came in, they took our children away to parochial and government schools. And they tried to take away our culture, our history, our language, our values, and our families. So she's in the same situation as our people. She has that, like he's saying, that historical trauma that we all live through and that we all carry every day. But we need to strive to maintain our identity as to who we are as a people and how we're related to Coast Salish. I really feel bad for her. I watched the video as she cries. Really makes you feel bad to see her crying to come home. All we're trying to do is help her. It's not only Lummi Nation that's fighting to get her back. There's a lot of other people that are helping all along the way. Are willing to step forward and help get her here. So, with these few words, I just wanted to share with you, Aishka.
So, this next video we're going to show, I'll warn you, is going to be a little difficult to watch. And Nina, the Water Festival president, had wanted to show this. And it's very important, not only because it's about our past history, but because it's what is happening now and in the news in recent weeks. You know, there are still racial injustices happening every day. It seems like we're dangerously close to moving backward at a time when we really need to be moving forward, both for our planet and for all who inhabit it, especially the indigenous people who have generations of knowledge about this land and water, and just a connection that we are still struggling to learn. Our white society has taught us domination over the earth in not in unsustainable use of resources, and domination over other people. It's unhealthy and unsustainable. So we have much to learn from those who truly know and love the planet and have been here for generations. A recent story that was just shared with me by a friend is that at the beginning of COVID, during the former administration, when Seattle Native medical personnel requested PPEs at the beginning of COVID, they were sent body bags. It's just horrifying to think that our culture and society still holds those cruel and outdated beliefs, and just so many injustices have been done. There's so much to make up for and ask forgiveness for and earn forgiveness. That hope for the future only lies in us finding our way forward and acknowledging the wrongs, and earning the forgiveness, and helping us all move forward together to save the planet and to save each other and ourselves. So in recent weeks, you've probably seen news of the boarding schools in Canada where mass grave sites have been found. First, there were 215 in Kamloops, and more recently, 751 unmarked graves at a former residential boarding school site in Saskatchewan. So that makes this next, we're just going to show you 8 minutes of this hour-and-a-half clip. We'll put the link to the full movie. It's an hour-and-a-half long movie. I watched it all. I recommend doing it. And then doing something to ground yourself afterwards. It was made in 2011. It was a journey where they traveled to many different sites of residential schools across the country. And it's the story of them learning and speaking about the unspeakable that hadn't been spoken about for so long. So we can go ahead and start the journey, Wellbriety Journey to Forgiveness.
A long time ago, before you were born, the old people told a story about a visit from the wisdom keepers. The wisdom keepers told us the lightskins are coming, and their numbers would be great. They will bring great destruction and confusion, that we will go through a time of testing. They will bring 4 mind changers to make us forget our ways. The mind changers would be a liquid, a black book, a song, and a card. They will take your land. They will poison the earth. They will bring disease and sickness. They will kill the women and the children. They will destroy our culture. Only our spirituality will be left. After the testing time, a great healing will take place. The eagles will come back. The buffalo will come back. We will come back. The prophecies will come true. We are now in a time of the fulfillment of prophecy. The story that happened has never been told. Now is the time to tell the story.
Genocide tactics, as defined by the United Nations. Number 1, killing members of the group. An example of that would be the Wounded Knee Massacre. Number 2, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. A good example of that would be the 1862 mass hanging. Number 3, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part. A good example of that would be the longest walk made by the Navajo Nation or the Cherokee Trail of Tears. Number 3, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. The United States government sponsored sterilization of Native American women. Number 4, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. In 1879, in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, the first of 500 boarding schools. It happened here in the United States of America. Some of the genocide tactics included massacres, forced relocations, sterilizations of women, boarding schools. California alone paid $12 million on Indian bounties. After the atrocities, only about 1% of the native population remained, making this perhaps the largest genocide of the 20th century. Genocide was sanctioned under 24 U.S. presidents from 1830 to 1933. Manifest Destiny, a term that was coined in 1839 and revised in 1845 to sanction the colonization of North America. It was used to designate the belief that the United States was destined, even divinely ordained, to expand across the North American continent. Thousands were murdered and relocated in the name of manifest destiny. By 1920, 99% of all Native Americans were wiped out. In 1879, the U.S. government implemented the genocide tactic of removing the children from their native culture and placing them in one of the 500 new boarding schools. This was an attempt to eradicate the Native American culture and assimilate those children into European culture. In 2008, a gathering took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The purpose of this gathering was to talk about intergenerational trauma. The pain and hurt at this conference was so intense that the elders instructed us to make a 7,000-mile journey across the United States. We traveled to current and former boarding schools to gather these stories from the people who attended when they were children. We recorded the stories of what happened to them. Here are their stories.
The stories that we heard on this journey from these elders were so unbelievable. Some of the elders, they even had a very difficult time even talking about what went on there. Many of the elders who told the stories of what happened to them was the first time that they ever told a story to anybody, even their children, their spouses. No one had known the experiences that they had in these boarding schools as children.
Said he liked this boarding school. Well, I, for one, hated the damn place. And I can start out with, I don't know if anybody here remembers their life when they were 6 years old. I do. It was right here at this boarding school that, I'm going to mention that name, Mr. Care. Boy, did I hate that son of a bitch. I mean, really, really hate. And I didn't know I was supposed to ask this man for permission. I'd come back that evening and, then he knocked the hell right out of me. There's a window there. He'd shut it, make sure nobody saw it. And when I got back, damn, he just whipped me all over my damn body. I mean, he knocked the hell right out of me. And neither one of us knew how to cry because we weren't supposed to cry.
It is said, "The truth shall set you free." The stories we heard on the journey of the beatings of the children for speaking their language, the violence to the children, the punishment system, the sexual abuse is directly tied to our current day community issues of alcoholism, drug abuse, violence, and sexual abuse. This is called intergenerational trauma.
Because this happened over 100 years ago, 130 years ago, and that historical trauma passes on from generation to generation. And we see many angry young people and others who don't even know why they're angry. And if we look back, we're treating the symptoms, but if we look back, we'll find the root causes go back to this time. When genocide took place.
We'll follow that with some more flute music from Peter Ali.
This is a Toltec flute. The Toltec people from my ancestry comes from on my mother's side. This is a drone flute. The Toltec flutes were normally made out of clay. A lot of flute makers make them out of wood. This is a contemporary Native American style flute. It's in C sharp, F sharp. It's in 432nd hertz, which means it has a certain sound wave, which I believe sound waves are healing. And once again, this is medicine. It's not just a piece of wood with holes in it. So I'll play you a tune from my Toltec flute. Thank you.
You're muted, Susan.
That song just felt like it was something to help us breathe and think about what we watched. This next one loops back to orcas. Trying to put together this event, we found everything is connected, as the tribes tell us. This is a video from a small group of people in Campbell River after the Kamloops grave site was found of 215 children at a boarding school there. And there was a larger ceremony in the city earlier that day. And this young man who had recently found his path and started this group felt like they needed to do a ceremony at the water for these lost souls. And this is a video of them doing that ceremony.
awesome. Yeah, oh, did you too? Okay. Oh, you turned yours sideways, you can see better. Yeah. I didn't.
Somehow the orcas have a way of healing us, and they have a way of knowing when important ceremonies are happening. And in tribal beliefs, they are their ancestors. And we have another video tomorrow from Leonard Forsman, chairman of the Suquamish tribe, who shares another instance of the orcas knowing when to show up and honoring the ancestors. And I hope that we all get to see some orcas soon and breathe deeply and take these films that we are watching, take them to heart and find a way that you personally can help. We really need to hold our Coast Salish friends and Indigenous people all around the world, but especially right now in our country and in Canada, where these past injustices are just finally being brought to light. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland recently announced an initiative to review the boarding schools in the US. So my fear and hope is there will be more headlines to come from our country. And the hope is that this will be healing. We just need to hold our brothers and sisters in our hearts and our prayers while they see these old wounds reopened and continue the healing process. I got this today from the Tulalip tribes, a letter, press release that was just sent by Terry Gobin, chairwoman, that I would like to read. It came out yesterday. As the history of boarding schools in North America is revealed, Tulalip stands in grief and solidarity. Our people know the terror that was inflicted on all tribal nations. The education guaranteed to us in the treaty was twisted into a weapon designed to strip us of our dignity, our families, our lifeways, all of the things that made us unconquerable people. Boarding schools were genocide. They were a state-sanctioned attempt to eradicate us from America. Throughout Canada and the United States, this unacknowledged history is finally coming to light. Here in our own homelands, a government boarding school stood. The stolen children of our people and many nations were sent to Tulalip. While masquerading as a way to help our people adapt to a changing world, these schools were a place to experiment on and abuse our children medically, physically, psychologically, and sexually. As a result, our people emerged from them broken, without those critical connections to their families. We still suffer from the generational trauma of these places. We are still healing the addiction and abuse that our loved ones turn to cope with the harm inflicted upon them. As more and more of our lost babies are uncovered, we wrap our arms around our loved ones. We are holding tight to one another as we all grieve. We grieve, but we are also encouraged. The world can no longer ignore the crimes against our people. Unfortunately, rebuilding trust between Indigenous people and the governments that tried to exterminate us may not happen in our lifetimes. The US government must acknowledge the atrocities perpetuated against us. Again, when the Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, recently announced an initiative to review the legacy of federal boarding school policies, it was a step in the right direction. We have a long road ahead of us. We ask our people and our allies to continue to push your legislators to uncover and acknowledge the true history of the stolen lands of America. That was from Terry Gobin, Tulalip chairwoman. The next two short videos we have, the first one is from Swinomish. It's an annual tribal march against addiction. The second is a Lummi Youth Summit with the Black Hawk Singers. These are just some of the ways that the tribes are beginning and trying to heal from all of these injustices.
We lost enough Native people, enough people to addiction. We knew this to stand our ground, to help each other out, to show the loving care and sharing. Show our people there's more to this life, that we're all here to help each other, all here to help.
That we're going to share the language, we're going to share the songs, and we're going to share the spirit of who our elders were. And that's going to reach their soul. That's going to reach their spirit. And if we really believe in what we're taught, we're going to guide our loved ones away from that opioid epidemic and bring them back to the path that we were put on by our grandparents, our great-grandparents.
I've been involved with our police department here since 1999. And I've dealt with a number of drug cases, overdoses, back to where I lost my grandson. He was 18, 19.
Tyler was a friend of mine, and
I lost my boy at the age of 19, Tyler Ross Edwards, to addiction. He battled for a year and a half. with the addiction. He fought and he lost to the addiction. And when he lost to this addiction, I wanted our people to know the fight that he had. We got together every day, every morning before I went to work, and we called it, This Has to Stop. We prayed every morning. And it got me through, and it helped me bring out my son's story.
Foreign substances that are brought here by outside people, given to our people to make money, to engage our people in a lifestyle that is not our custom or our culture, is here to harm our people, our community members.
I try to show my grandchildren that I'm there for them every day. I bring them to school every day, and I'm with them all day long, as much as I can be.
I'd ask them, just try to seek help and pray to God for the healing. Our elders, talk to your elders and get the learning that they have.
You know, you heard, I don't know if you heard Huge out here, his father, Eugene Edwards, you know, it just has to stop.
I'm a true believer in what we're born into. And if it's in their hearts, you know, they're born into it, they're gonna have that much strength to face these obstacles in life.
Like I said, this is our 6th year with This Has to Stop. Like I said, it's growing every year this March. We do it in March every year. You know, like I said, it grows, more and more people stepping up to fight this addiction. You know, our grandfather already told me, you know, it's not about now. What are we gonna have for our grandkids, our great-grandkids down the road? We don't fight for what our belief is now. So that's why it's so important for me to keep moving forward with This Has to Stop and fighting this addiction. The overdose that is taking place, I didn't want to hide it from our people.
And we've tried different approaches. We tried, you know, showing them that we cared and we loved them and wanted to help them, to tough love where the threats came in and none of it worked. And, you know, reaching out to them and trying to say, you have to do this, you know, or this has to stop. We need them to be able to say, I'm ready, I'm done, I want the help.
I wanted our people to know that we need help. Our community needs help in this.
Next, we have a video from the Lummi Youth Summit with the Black Hawk Singers. The Black Hawk Singers have also been a large part of the totem journeys and just wonderful, wonderful young men. So I'm gonna play that for you.
I Arkansas sa Haishkai Sayatsin Platsatian Aqualia. Just sharing with you how important the Salish Sea is to our people. How important water is to all of us, because the water gives us life. The water gives us life.
Oh, oh,
My name is Jay Julius. My traditional names are Slailton and Watatlam. I'm a fisherman. I'm currently the chairman, and I've been fishing since I was really little. My memories of my dad are on the water. That's where I'm one with my father. That's I fished with my grandpa. That's where I'm one with my grandpa and grandma. And for me, that's important to pass down and carry on. So when we fight the particular fights for the environment, for the Salish Sea, for the salmon, for the water, for water quality, that's a lot of what it's about too, is protecting, preserving who we are.
Some of the things that we pray for, we're not just here singing and dancing. That when the kids are dancing, when we're singing, that we have a prayer in our hearts. We have a prayer in our hearts for our family. Have a prayer in our hearts for our elders. We have a prayer in our hearts for the ones that can't dance. Thinking about our Mother Earth, you know, we're here thinking about our environment, praying for our environment. And all the ones that swim under the water, the Blomidgeton, the fish, all the ones that live under the water.
So my name is Tasia Julius. What I'm going to talk about today is specifically the Southern Resident killer whales. I've been doing a lot of research on them by choice, just because it's always interested me, and then being from Lummi Nation, our people are really like connected to the ocean and to everything that inhabits it, whether it's the salmon, the killer whales. And so with everything that's going on, it really hits not only myself but our people hard, hearing about, you know, everything that the killer whales of the Puget Sound are going through.
Meet down first. Meet down first.
Years ago, there used to be a pond at the end of the Salmon Town building. And the frogs would be so loud. So loud.
The Lummies were the ones that originally designed and made the reef nets. They made it in mind to capture the fish effectively, but as well they had conservancy in mind. Within the net there was a small hole that would allow escapement of a certain size, so that return would always, or that run would always return. It would never take it all, never take too much.
I've lived on the reservation my entire life, and I went to a church, and that's how I grew up. But I was exposed to the culture when I was 18, and I just want to let you guys know I fell in love with it. I fell in love with who I am as a Lummi person. And when I look at our young people, and I'm so thankful you guys are here today, because you guys are falling in love with who you are. That water and the life that comes from it feeds your spirit. And then you guys go out and you provide medicine to the person sitting next to
Okay. So we're slowly moving on to the healing parts and the more positive and inspiring things. We're going to take a short break. First, we'll have a short 3-minute video with Swill Canham and Peter Ali all such dear hearts that have just done so much for the world, and for healing in many ways. So we will do that and then take a short break, and we'll come back and move on to salmon and some positive things that are happening with salmon restoration. So we won't leave you totally depressed, we promise.
And we're done. Thank you. It was a short piece.
It's the best piece ever. I hope y'all are recording that. Send it to me and him.
I'm going to play while I'm giggling, but those going to bounce all over the place.
Okay, let's see, why don't we come back at about 2:15? Go get a breath of fresh hot air or stretch. And thank you for joining us and hanging in there. We will get on to some really inspiring interviews, and look forward to being right back.
Okay, I've been honored once again.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I hope everyone has been able to breathe a little and ready to move on to the wonderful world of salmon and some great things being done by people and tribes around the region. So we will start with another great story from the late Chief Bill James from Lummi, the story of Salmon Woman.
A long time ago, I was listening to the old people talk about what was called the Salmon Woman. And our people lived in a village up by the mouth of the river. And there was plenty of salmon, there was plenty of food. And one day the salmon disappeared. There was no more salmon. Pretty soon the people started dying off, and no more salmon. So they sent out a man, came out this way, way out here, and he was looking for food for our people. And he came out and the fog set in, and while he was coming out this way, the fog was so thick, he had a hard time finding his way, and then pretty soon he could hear this woman. She was crying, and on the water, when you live on the water here like this, the sound carries a long ways. When it's foggy, you can hear a long ways. And he went in search of the Salmon Woman. He found her, and she said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm looking for food for my people. My people are dying, my people are starving." And pretty soon she says, "Well," "I'm the Salmon Woman." She says, "Take off your big hat and dip it into the water." And he did. The salmon filled up his canoe like that. And so he invited her to come to the village, to where he lived. And she came with him to the village, and she told the people he told the people that this was the Salmon Woman, and the salmon are her children. And pretty soon, she says, "Well, we're going to stay here for a while, so you send your children, go up the river and make your beds up the river. You make your beds up the river." And so that's what they did. Everybody was happy. Everybody had lots of salmon to eat. Everything was really good. And until one day, someone must have said, We don't know whether it was a child, we don't know whether it was an adult, we don't know who it was. All we ever eat around here is salmon, baked salmon, we got boiled salmon, we got barbecued salmon, we got salmon. That's all we ever eat around here is salmon. So Salmon woman, she became offended because they didn't like her children anymore. So she said, well, my children, come on. So she loaded up her children. Away she went, took her children away, and they came way out here again. And our people start dying again. They sent the same man out to find him again, and find her again, rather. And he found her way out here again in the fall. He convinced her to come back. So she reluctantly come back to the village. He promised her that we won't do that anymore. And so pretty soon she came back to the village, and the people welcomed her back. And every year from then on, we have a salmon ceremony, the first salmon. We honor her children. We honor the first salmon that comes to our rivers and to our village. We have the first salmon ceremony. And the teachings are that you never say, I don't like it. You teach your children to say, I don't like it, because your food can be easily taken away from you. That's a teaching behind that story. So that's the story of the salmon.
So next we have the Lummi doing a salmon ceremony in Coopville. This is from August 2017 as part of one of our orca capture commemorations. So we'll show that next.
And speak in English a little bit now, kind of sharing with you what just happened here. We're returning the salmon back to the water, giving thanks to the Creator for providing food for our people. We're giving thanks to the salmon woman for taking care of our people all of these generations. And we're thanking all of the elders and all of the ancestors around us for coming here to be with us today. And thank you folks for all coming to join us today, Sam. That's all
Okay. Next, we will have another Lummi video, short video, as part of their efforts to help Scully Choctonut, Lolita Tokitai, come back to her family. Their efforts, the Lummi's efforts, are also focused on helping her family, the Southern Resident Orcas, which means bringing back the salmon. So in this video, they were out doing ceremonial feeding for J17, who was not doing well.
Ellie, can you tell us what we're doing here?
Sorry, we're working on the video.
We are filling up the tote and then plugging in the aerator.
One more? We'll see. One more. Okay. Not yet? Yeah, there we go.
Well, we're trying to get
Right in front of Richard.
a salmon to an alien killer whale.
We're going to twist in the line.
One of our fishermen is going to be giving us a king salmon, and we're going to go find the whale.
We're going to try this again and see if the video will show the video and the audio. Apologies. While we're doing that, somebody had asked about the blanket behind me that was made by Doe Star, who lives here on Whidbey. Was a thank you gift I received quite a few years ago. It's one of my favorite things in the whole world. You can see the little white circle is the whale's blowhole in this beautiful whale blanket. She's an amazing artist, amazing person who's also been involved in the water festival for many years.
Ellie, can you tell us what we're doing here? Am I supposed to know what we're doing? We are filling up the tote and then plugging in the aerator.
One more? We'll see. One more. Okay. Not yet? Yeah, there we go.
Well, we're trying to get
Right in front of Richard.
a salmon to an alien killer whale.
We're going to twist in the line.
One of our fishermen is going to be giving us a king salmon, and we're going to go find the whale.
Which way?
We're going to ceremonially feed it. Ceremony being the important word here. And when we finish here, we're going to go find the whales.
Push it one more time. We should just get about 8 poles and fish off of this, huh?
Keepers coming in full speed.
See?
Why?
You can't kill it.
Oh, ready to grab.
Like get out of the pathway?
Yeah. Tell him, Mr. Russo.
Ooh, I can't grab it.
You'll find a little lady tonight. Since you've been out here, Steamer, have you seen any dorsals?
There.
Any what? Any killer whale? No. Huh? That's right, that's right. That's right, Richard's right. It's a spiritual feeling.
I thought the fish was starting to kick like,
Okay, that was refreshing.
are you wet?
Hard for you to do, and
Yeah, it is.
So can you just say a couple words about what we're doing and why we're out here?
I was voluntold.
Who's the dark one? Does he have any IS?
We're making an effort. We're making a statement.
Personal territory esquire it's honors that Sicilian alltså kvalfalmisten i esquire I hawk which is Chilangan it's a helmo Tuscano he's all macromo catla honors that Sicilian it's a kvalfalmisten i esquire hawk which is Chilangan it's a helmo
Raynell, do you want to say anything before I shut the camera off?
Don't cry. We're just approaching the spot that's been selected to do our offering and our call to our Quithalmachin. It's a beautiful day out. Timing couldn't be more perfect. Weather, people, everyone that should be here is here. It'll be a blessed event.
Sequitu Quisia, Sequitu Quisia, Sequitu Quisia.
And next we have another salmon ceremony from the Samish, from Rosie Caillou James and Bill Bailey. And thanks to Rosie and Bill for all they've done. Very special people. So our last in our little series of salmon short videos here, we have Lula Bombard, professor at Skagit Valley College, a lecturer, storyteller, and of the Seneca Mohawk tribe. He has been a long time a member of the Penn Cove Water Festival committee and told stories every year, and always a delight. So he will be reading or telling a salmon story in front of the salmon wheel that we'll learn more about tomorrow, that is at the Island County Museum now.
I'm Lula Bombard. I'm Seneca Mohawk. My people come from upstate New York, northeastern Canada or southeastern Canada. I've been telling stories for over 50 years now, and I've told stories from different Native American groups from all over the United States. I've told stories in Europe and in Asia, and most recently in New Zealand. So I usually tell stories about animals and people and how things came to be. And Native Americans tell stories about how things came to be, and each group has their own way of telling things. I was asked to tell some orca stories, and the orca myths and legends are from all the way up from Alaska all the way down into California, and they all differ from one respect to another. This particular story I'm going to tell you is about Nestalini, who was it's a Tlingit tale, and it's about a young man who lived at Cake, and he was a wonderful carver of poles and every other kind of thing that you use for wood carving. He was also a wonderful harpoon maker. He made seal harpoons. And he loved this young lady from another island, and he married her, and he went to live with her family. He was very, very interested in pleasing her family, so he did the best he could, and he was wholly accepted by her family, except for her brothers. He had one, the younger brother really liked him a lot, and he was very impressed with him. But the other three brothers were very jealous of his activities and his prowess, so they plotted against him. So the time of the great seal hunt came. Nestalini was out in the boat with the brothers, and he came to the great big rocks out in the straits, and there were seals on the rock, and he jumped off of the canoe and speared one of the seals, and the seal harpoon's point broke off, and the seal escaped. And just as he turned around, he saw that the canoe with the brothers in it was going away from the rocks, and the younger brother was asking for them to stop and go back and pick him up, but they kept on going, and they left him there on the rock, and he had no food and no weapons, nothing, and so he just kind of covered up his head up with a cloak. And later on in the morning, he heard a sound calling his name. And he looked, and there was a seal who had turned himself back into a man, and asked him if he could come and come and help the chief's son who had been hurt. So he went down into the kingdom of the seals, in which he found the young seal that he had speared was dying. So he cured the young man, got the seal point out of him, and cured him. And the seal chief was so happy about that he actually gave him extra powers and gave him safe passage back to the island, where he told his wife, don't say anything about anything. He took his woodworking tools and he went into the forest, and he took down a great yellow cedar, and he started carving the figure of a big, large fish. And it was and he covered it with black paint and called it a black fish, and it had white streaks on the side. And he took it down to the ocean, and he put it in the ocean, and it turned alive and turned into the orca. And he told the orca, he says, when the brothers return, I want you to capsize their boat and take them out and save the younger brother, because he's a good man and I don't want you to hurt him. So this whale went out, capsized the boat, took out the brothers, except for the younger one, and gave them a trip back. And after that, a whale, this blackfish used to come back and forth and leave a seal or leave something on the beach for the people. And they all recognized the fact that he had done that, and so they took the killer whale as their crest. And that became the story of Natalini. And they say, some of the Tlingits still say that every once in a while you can see a orca come by and Natalini is riding him. And that's that story.
Can you tell us a bit about your association with the Water Festival?
Yes, I'm the Native American advisor to the Water Festival, which used to happen every summer in June. And my job was to kind of look at the cultural aspects of the activity and make sure everybody was culturally aware of things. And then I'm also the entertainment lead, so I contact the people who do the entertainment, and that's my job.
And what was your job in real life?
In real life, I was a college professor. I just retired after 28 years here, 5 years on a Navajo reservation, 3 years in San Antonio at St. Mary's University. I have a bachelor's degree in anthropology, a master's degree in sociology, and a PhD in anthropology. So,
Thank you. You have another story?
This is a real short one. There's a story about how the people that go out in their boats and they drown, they all become killer whales. And that's why the killer whales are often seen by the beaches, because they're looking for people. And Natalini actually told the killer whale that he created not to eat people.
And what do the natives here call an orca?
I think it's literally translated as a blackfish.
And you said at one time that the word they use means people under the sea?
People under the sea, the blackfish, people under the sea, because they were people.
So, you know,
Okay. Okay. Thank you to Lou for that, those stories, and for all he's done for the Water Festival. And I just wanted to say that the salmon wheel, the beautifully carved wheel behind him, was done by artist Roger Perdue. There will be more about that, and the whale wheel, which he designed and oversaw. First, the salmon wheel was at the head of the Coupeville Wharf for many years till it was getting too fragile. So it is now housed in the Island County Museum, so it can be preserved, and is such a beautiful work of art. And we have Roger's wife and some Water Festival committee members talking more about how that came to be, and the whale wheel that's there now, that will be part of tomorrow's event. So I think next we are going to move to, we're kind of checking our time here. Okay, yes, I think we are going to do the salmon defense video. It's an animated short of Billy Frank Jr. from Nisqually, who his whole life fought for the salmon, was arrested many, many times. And this is just a wonderfully produced video about the salmon and Billy's message. So we can go ahead and show this now.
We have got to think in the long term. We can't think in the short term. We've got to think about it for all of us, for everyone. You go out and you pray to the moon, you pray to the sun. You talk to them trees. You know, you talk to that water, you see that tide going out, you see that tide coming in. You see the animals all swimming, you know everything is good when that's happening. When them animals come down to see you and talk to you and then leave and migrate out into the ocean. And they come back again next year. The salmon has to have access to that river, way up into them upper reaches of the watershed where the water's cold. And then they have to come migrate back out to sea. And then they go hit the ocean, they go clean up the Aleutian Islands, and the stars guide them back here. The stars guide them right back to that river. The Indian had everything here. The Indian had his medicine. The Indian had his drums and his music. And he was in art, he was in dance, and he had everything. We knew the white man was coming over the mountain long before he ever got here. And we welcomed him, you know. And what sustained him here? What sustained him? The salmon sustained his life. He was hungry, you know, when he was starving to death. But there was so much food, he didn't know what was poison and what wasn't until the Indian told him. And he didn't even know how to catch fish. He didn't know how to survive. He did survive, you know. But the Indian was the help along the way. We don't walk on this earth very long, and we got a lot of changes that are happening here in this century, and we have to work together and remind each other about what was the past and our history, and be able to live together and survive together. Help your tribes and help your people. Be something that you can spend a lifetime helping. And you can make a difference. You can make a big difference in the world, just one person. If you got a thought process of a long, long thought into the next 100 years. So it never stops, it continues on. We've always been told that we got a short time on this earth as we walk. So try to make things better as you walk on this earth.
That is just such a powerful little piece. Great thing to share. And we can probably share the link to that if people want to share it. Boy, thank you all for hanging in there. I know it's likely warm wherever you are. This next piece is just such a wonderful interview with Willie Frank, who's Billy Frank Jr.'s son, and David Trout, who has worked at Nisqually forever. Cindy and I just had a delightful 45 minutes with them the other day doing these interviews, and everything they said just encapsulated what we're trying to do and say with this event. And I'm just very pleased that they were willing to give us their time, both being very busy. Willie is the chairman of the Nisqually tribe, and he was on vacation, and he still honored our request to be part of the event and do this interview from his vacation, which really meant a lot to us. So with no further ado, we will share this interview with two men who have done a lot of salmon restoration and whose heads and hearts and spirits are in the right place.
I think my earliest recollections is going to meetings as a young boy with my dad, and having that opportunity to sit around the table with folks like David and many other tribal leaders. And of course, growing up, my father, he always talked about the importance of salmon. You know, he talked about the importance of clean water, clean air, most importantly, to have the salmon for the next generation. And that's what we're working on today at Nisqually. But I think we are in a very tough time right now, thinking about our natural resources. And you know, I know that you know, our goal at Nisqually is to make sure that we do have salmon for the next generation, and we are able to teach our culture and our history, really, in our way of life. So I mean, throughout my whole life, I've been taught and, you know, educated on the importance of our salmon.
Sure. So with a last name of Trout, it was sort of preordained that I'd become a biologist. I knew early on in my life what I wanted to do. And I found salmon through my education at the University of Washington and becoming a salmon biologist. But I really didn't learn about salmon and treaty rights and really important things until I started at the Nisqually Indian tribe in 1987. I was hired by Billy Frank to come run his program and to take care of the watershed. And ever since then, I've been connected to the watershed and to the community and to people like Willie for the last 34 years working on these issues. And it's something that I find in my core. It's really important for me. I'm an outdoors person, love to go fishing, love to have my kids out in the outdoor, out in the real world. And so leaving a legacy for them, leaving it better than we found it, is something I'm trying to do through my work.
Well, you know, I think I always think about this, you know, my dad, he could have been one of the most bitter human beings in the world after everything that happened to him, being arrested over 50 times, you know, thrown in jail for exercising his treaty right. And so I think it's, you know, he was the master at bringing people together. You know, he brought the state, the tribes together, the feds and the tribes, and he got them all in the same room. And I think his commitment to that showed, you know, over his lifetime of what he wanted to focus on. He was looking at the bigger picture. He had his own agenda, but it was bigger. It was all of us in the state of Washington, and he understood that we all need to work together. I think that that's something that we need to get back to. You know, I know we are always committed to doing what's best for the resources at Nisqually. You know, but I think for him, you know, it was just his I always call it a little bit of Billy magic, you know, and that's really what he had. Anybody who ever met him or were around him would know what I'm talking about. You know, whether he knew you or not, he'd come up and give you a big hug. And my wife and I were talking, he'd have a tough time with COVID, I think, because he's a hugger. So I think that you know, this would be frustrating for him, but you know, he was the master at bringing people together. And I know David's got some great points too.
Yeah, and you know, all of that is so spot on. It's pretty rare for a leader to be able to shift gears in the middle of something like the treaty rights struggle, to go from fighting in the courtrooms and fighting on the riverbank to then becoming the person who brought everybody together to find collaborative, cooperative solutions. And it was really inspiring. But, you know, I think more importantly, Billy had the ability of making you feel like you were special and like you were important and you were necessary to get the job done. And so he cast his net very widely to bring in lots of people because he knew it was going to take a big community to solve the problems. And you were always part of his community, but he always made you felt like you were the most important part of that community. And that was pretty special. And with that, you give him loyalty. And I would run through walls and still do for Billy. And there's nothing I wouldn't do for him. He was pretty amazing. And he was also very hopeful. I mean, he saw the challenges and saw the problems, but he always saw the positive possibilities coming out of it. And that's pretty inspiring. And that keeps me going today as well. We're challenged to try to recover salmon and recover our southern resident killer whale populations. But because of Billy's hope, I have hope that we can do it, and we still will do this. You know, I think it goes back before salmon recovery. I think our biggest achievement, and Billy was central to this, was the creation of a watershed community to all pull in the same direction. Billy was instrumental in the creation of the Nisqually River Council. It's the oldest watershed council west of the Mississippi. And he brought all the players together in an entire watershed to pull for a common agenda. And we did it at a time before salmon were listed and before salmon recovery was a big deal or before water was a big issue. And so we were able to, because of Billy bringing us together, develop a tremendous amount of trust over a long period of time through the 80s, through the 90s, so that when salmon were listed in 1999, it was very quick of the Nisqually River Council to turn to the Nisqually Indian tribe and say, you need to lead us through this. Now, recognizing at the table was also the state of Washington and the federal government, and nobody looked to them for leadership on this. They all turned to the Nisqually Indian tribe and said, you've got to figure this out and get us through this. And because of that, we were able to put together a recovery plan quickly and identify priorities as a community and act on them. And so having all that together, we've done some incredible things. And, you know, purchasing the Braggett farm and restoring the estuary down there to set the example for our neighbors on the other side of the river, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that you can restore estuary and salmon will use it, and it'll make a difference, led to them restoring their property as well. And so together we were able to do the biggest restoration north of San Francisco here in the Nisqually. And that's just a start. There are other things that we do, and all of it is through partnerships, and all of it is still connected to the Billy creating this community of folks that are pulling in the same direction. And so that's what I think is our biggest accomplishment. That'll be enduring and everlasting.
And I think, you know, one of the things is, you know, his openness, his willingness to work with everybody, but realizing that, you know, realizing for the tribes, it's not going to be just the tribes. It's not going to be just the state or the feds, you know. But I think our biggest accomplishment that I've seen is definitely the dikes being removed at the refuge there, the Billy Frank Jr. Wildlife Refuge. I still can't get over driving by there on high tide. It looks so amazing. It's so beautiful to see that water coming back up and flowing naturally. And, you know, it's a sight that, God, I picture it all the time, you know. It's so beautiful down there. And, you know, I think the work that the Nisqually tribe does is not just for the tribal, you know, our fishermen, it's for everybody in the state. We have 2 hatcheries on the river. that produce Chinook salmon, and you know, we're able to produce salmon, of course, for our fishermen, but also for other tribal folks and state fishermen as well. So I think those are some of the bigger accomplishments that I think definitely.
Yeah, and Susan, it's hard to think about the work that we do on a time frames calendar, because what we're doing is we're putting a watershed back together, and it takes a long time for these pieces to come into play. And you know, we worked on the Braggett acquisition for 15 years before we actually made it happen. And the same thing with the restoration on the refuge side. And there are other big things we're working on now that some are just starting to come to fruition, but we've been working on it for 15 or 20 years. And you know, a great example of that is we're at the other end of the watershed, buying back commercial timberlands from commercial timber landowners, bringing it back to local ownership, including the Nisqually Indian tribe, to manage it for ecosystem benefits and for timber harvest is a really big deal. We've been working on that for 15 years. And so it looks like sometimes we just do these big splashy kind of projects, but recognize that there's a lot of work and a lot of time that goes into making them happen. And sometimes they happen 2 or 3 at a time because it's just the way things work out, because we've been able to sequence them well. There's a lot of big things we've done, and there's a lot of big things we're going to continue to do, because it's going to take big things to make a difference for salmon and for this ecosystem.
And I think you're right, David. One of the things I see is that we'll never stop working on the river and the watershed. You know, the tribe manages 80 miles from the Mount Rainier to the Puget Sound. And I think, you know, one of our goals is to always try to get property that comes up for sale along the river, along the watershed. I mean, David's natural resources department, I mean, it's definitely got to be the #1 natural resources throughout Indian country, let alone the state folks as well. You know, I know folks get tired of hearing about the successes of Nisqually, but, you know, it just shows our dedication to the natural resources. Well, I think for me, it would be to be able to fish steelhead in the Nisqually River. You know, I've been fishing for 20+ years on the Nisqually, and I've never been able to fish for steelhead. We have three species in the Nisqually. We have Chinook, Coho, and Chum. And, you know, David, maybe you can talk about how many days we used to be on the water and where we're at today. That'll help.
Yeah. So when I started back in 1987, we had one of the strongest wild runs of steelhead in Puget Sound. And by 1993, it had gone from 8,000 fish to 500 fish. And so, as Willie said, we haven't fished on steelhead in over almost 30 years now. So when I started in 1987, we were fishing 105 days a year from July through March, fishing for all the various species of salmon that came back from Chinook and pinks and Coho and Chum and steelhead. We fished a big block of time during that year, and that was really important for the tribe and tribal members to be on the river. In 2015, we fished 8 days. And so the time on the water is really the currency, the value that of the work that we do is to provide Willie and his tribal members more time on the Nisqually to do what the treaty said they could do and should do forever. And so, Susan, in terms of the kind of things that need to happen to make that possible, is, as Willie pointed out, this is a forever kind of thing. There's no end to salmon recovery and protecting the environment, because the world's constantly going to change. So we have to be on it all the time. There's no finish line. We just keep protecting and restoring as much as we possibly can. It is impossible to restore too much habitat, because the fish can use it all, and the things that depend on the fish can use it all. The big things that are in front of us now, and I'll start down in the Delta and work our way upstream, the crossing of I-5 across the Nisqually Delta is causing impacts to our salmon recovery habitat. It's causing flood impacts. It's placed at risk the South Sound economy and our national security, because at some point soon, the Nisqually River is going to overtop that I-5 and take it out. And so we need to resolve that I-5 crossing on the Nisqually Delta, and we're working with partners. Again, it's all about partnerships, working with partners in the South Sound region. all speaking with a common voice about solving that problem. And we've made some progress and we'll continue to make progress and it'll get done. And as you move upstream, there's continued restoration of lands from the I-5 all the way up to the Alder LeGrand Dam to River Mile 42. We currently have about 80% of the main stem Nisqually permanent stewardship. Our goal is 90%. We're closing in on that, but we're not going to stop until we do that. And then we have to restore the habitats that have been degraded and then maintain them over time and make sure that they're in a position to be resilient and adaptable to climate change. And I mentioned this this plan that we have to buy back timberlands and put it in local ownership. We're currently at about 5,000 acres in total for our community forest. Our goal is 50,000 acres. And so we've got a long way to go, but it's important to have goals and to keep moving towards something positive. And so we're really excited about that. And then in connection with that, I know I'm talking a lot, I apologize for that, but
oh, you're good. Keep going.
In connection with that, related to timberland ownership, but also providing educational opportunities, the Nisqually Indian Tribe is partnering with the YMCA of Greater Seattle to acquire in the neighborhood of about 3,000 acres in the upper Nisqually around Mineral Lake to develop a Y camp and to provide for sustainable timber harvest and access to the tribe for cultural purposes, including hunting and gathering and vision quest and medicinals and all those things that are important to the tribe. So we're tying together in that project in particular, sustainable ownership of a landscape with education and getting people connected to the natural world. There'll be opportunities for tribal members of Nisqually and other tribes to be there in the camp, but also non-tribal members to be there and understand what it's like to be in the Nisqually watershed and learn about the Nisqually culture and traditions and learn about salmon. And so our hope there is to educate a lot of people through going through the camps that will be educated voters and will support salmon recovery forever, because it is a forever thing.
Well, and I think you see people like David and many others at Nisqually who've committed their their whole life to this, and you're seeing myself and other tribal leaders who are committing their life to this, and that goes back to my father, teaching us that it's going to take a lifetime to be able to, and after we're gone, hopefully there's the next generation that will step up to make sure and to continue moving forward and making sure our resources are protected. Yes, definitely. I've been fishing now on the Nisqually for over 20 years and very grateful that I fish with my older brother who just turned 60 this year. And having that opportunity to be on the water and learn from him and my dad also, of course. And the great thing about, being on the water fishing is that my father, my brother, and I were all able to fish together for a little while. My father at 81 years old, he was still fishing on the Nisqually. And, every time a fish would hit the net, he'd damn near jump in after that fish. And that showed the importance of the salmon to me. I mean, it gave me a clear view of what we need to do to protect this. And you see that excitement in our elders when we are able to fish, when they get out there. And, I always compare it to, for us, it's going to church on Sundays when our fishing season is open. We're able to get on that water and exercise our treaty rights. And whether we catch one fish or 100, it's still getting on the water. My father always taught us, you have to set those nets, whether there's fish in the water or not, because if you don't, they'll start to take them away, chip away at your treaty rights. And so, being on the water, it's very spiritual. I think that with the way society is right now, fast acting, fast moving, social media, everything, I think it's important to slow down and remember, what's important in life. And of course, for the Nisqually tribe and all of our fishermen, it's being on the water and, sharing something that our ancestors did. And my grandfather, Willie Frank Sr., who lived to be 104. And we still fish in the same area at Frank's Landing so we're going on 4 generations of Frank men fishing right there on the river. I think that for us, it's, we used to be able to fish and be able to, support your family and pay the bills. And now we're not able to do that, so it's more of the spiritual aspect of being on that water and relating with the fish and respecting the river. Growing up, I was always taught that you need to respect the river. And, my dad always said the river's got to eat sometimes. And if you respect it, you'll be safe on the river. And I think, I think being down on the river is just it's really good medicine for our native people. We see our elders in their 70s still fishing. And when they're on the river, it's almost like there's nothing else matters. You're on the river and it's something about that water and seeing the eagles, seeing the fish. And one of the things we do is we always leave salmon for the eagles. Well, my dad always said you got to feed all the animals that come down here. So we always leave some fish for the eagles. And, and one of the things we also do, the first salmon we catch every year, we give to an elder. It's just being on the water. I think like I said earlier, I think it's just sharing that same area where my father, my grandfather, my brother and I still fish. I think that right there, and knowing the history of Frank's Landing and the fishing wars. And I think that's very powerful too. And being right there, and you still feel that throughout our people.
Yeah, I've got a quick story to tell that, and there's so many memories after 35 years at Nisqually. But one that sort of sticks out for me is I think it was 1990. It was August. I was heading up to the Wilcox Farms to do a salmon barbecue for the family. And I drove over the bridge at McKenna, and the river was bone dry. There was not a drop of water in it. And as it turns out, we had a massive slide, like the Oso slide, that occurred at the mouth of Ohop Creek. A massive amount of the bank gave way and plugged the Nisqually River and created a lake behind this slide. And the next day, everybody was talking about bringing giant machinery up there and engineered solutions, and the Corps of Engineers was ready to come in with bulldozers, and Billy kept saying, we don't want to do that. Let's let the river heal itself. It will heal itself if we just give it time. And so that day, Billy wanted to get up and see it. And so he and another person from my staff and Billy and I got in a canoe, and we launched up at the mouth of the Michelle, which was at that point a lake, and we canoed down to where the slide had occurred at the Ohop. And as I look back at it now, that was probably not the smartest thing to do, because the current was really, really strong near the slide area, and there were a bunch of trees, and we could have easily gotten impinged against a tree, and I don't know what would have happened, but that didn't happen. We were able to get down there, and what we saw was almost miraculous. It was Chinook salmon coming through the trees that had just recently slid into the river and finding their way upstream to spawn anyway. And Billy was right. The river will heal itself. We don't always have to intervene with our high-powered engineers and equipment to solve the problems. Mother Nature will solve it. And after seeing that, Billy was able to use that to keep people away from the river and let it heal itself. And it did. It was just a matter of days before it was gone. And the river is in much better shape now because we let nature heal itself. And just the amazing power of salmon to survive in the face of that kind of thing is pretty remarkable. And I'll always remember that.
Well, it was funny, David. We went to a wedding a couple weeks ago, Peg and I, up in Woodinville. One of our friends got married, and at dinner it was salmon and steak. And so Peg and I are going. It was like buffet style, so we're going through, and we get to the salmon, and I'm like, I don't know if that looks like a farm raised salmon.
Right.
So we got a little bit, and Peg took one bite, and she's like, "Yep, farm raised." I mean, you can just tell too. I mean, you can tell the difference between our Chinook salmon in the river and the farm raised stuff that's not raised around here. And thinking about that, one of the funny stories is in 2000, I believe it was about 2009, was that when the salmon got away? You remember that, the farm raised?
When the net pens broke?
The net pens broke, and I remember we caught some farm raised salmon in the Nisqually. I think we caught 1 or 2.
Atlantic salmon.
Yeah, it was Atlantic salmon. And so I remember calling my dad and saying, "Hey Dad, you want to have a fish for dinner?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, we caught a couple Atlantic salmon." And I was joking with him because we always joked about Atlantic salmon. And he said, "Well, we don't eat that crap, you know." And so my brother and I, we left it sitting on the bank there for the eagles and for the seagulls and all the wildlife down there, and nobody touched it. None of them ate it. It was pretty remarkable to see that. The sea lions, the eagles, and all the other birds, you know, you can't keep them off of fish when they see actual salmon from the Nisqually. But these farm raised fish, it was just, they didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, wild salmon, natural salmon are pretty darn incredible for a lot of reasons. Yeah, I think eating farm salmon, when you have a choice to eat sustainably caught wild fish, is actually detrimental to what we're trying to do. Supporting the local economies, whether it's the tribes or some of these fishing communities, is really important to keep them engaged as part of the overall world of salmon. And having farm raised salmon substitute for that disconnects people from wild salmon. And so if it's easy to get salmon out of a net pen, maybe you don't worry as much about wild fish. Maybe you're not willing to pay as much in taxes to save wild fish. But if it's there and present and you can connect to it, maybe there's a chance that people will stay connected to salmon for a long time. And that connection, I think, is really important.
I think for us, you know, we are in such a unique and I would say bad situation when it comes to our salmon in the Puget Sound. And one of the things that we have to educate folks on is that we have to educate them that hatchery fish are treaty fish. And you know, when we're able to like I said earlier about the hatcheries, I mean, if it wasn't for the work that David and his staff has done producing all of our Chinook salmon, or you know, a good amount of our Chinook salmon, I think that you know, I think that's huge, and I don't think people understand that. So we have to continue to educate folks, you know, whether they're native or not. Even our own tribal members, we have to educate on. You know, the times have changed so much around the state of Washington that we have to go out and educate our own members as well.
I think I'm not sure if it's a lesson to be learned from the tribes, but something to be observed is that with the decrease in fish and fishing time on the river, a loss of connection to their history and to their culture has brought a sense of urgency to the tribes and tribal leaders. And I hear that in Willie's voice. The sands of the hourglass are running out. We're all doing the right thing, but we've got to be faster at it because the world is changing more quickly than salmon can adapt. And if we don't give them healthy places to come home to, we could lose this battle. And so we need to pick up the pace of what we're doing and follow the tribe's lead in caring for these things as if they're really, really important. To the tribes, there's nothing more important than salmon. But for the rest of us in the state of Washington, you know, it's less than 2% of our budget that we spend annually on things. We treat it as a luxury and not a necessity. And we need to learn from the tribes about treating these things as necessities.
And I think you're right, David. I mean, one of the things growing up, I mean, I think when the salmon are healthy, we are healthy as human beings too. You know, we know the water's clean and healthy, and we know our salmon are spawning and coming back home as well. And I think that's huge. You know, I feel like we have to be the voice of the salmon. You know, we relate to the salmon. We don't look at them as a money grab or, you know, a dollar sign. We look at that as our relative, just like the orca. And I think it's important to make sure that people understand that. Definitely. I don't want to be the generation that catches the last salmon. I don't want to be the generation that has to go see a salmon in a museum or a picture of a salmon. You know, I want to be able to pass this down to the, you know, 7 generations, you know, and we need to be able to provide an opportunity for them to know what it's like to fish on the Nisqually. The same, you know, the same way that their ancestors and family members did as well. And the good thing about that is that I've had a lot of younger tribal members who want to learn how to fish, you know, and that's amazing to hear that. You didn't hear that 10 years ago. You know, now today you're seeing more and more tribal members wanting to learn and wanting to be a part of it. And it's not even about the money anymore. It's just about being on the water. And you know, that makes my heart happy. And I know that's something my father would have wanted to see, is making sure that we do have salmon for that next generation and making sure we don't do anything to catch the last salmon.
Yeah, I think that is right on. And what I would add is that we're doing tremendous work in the Nisqually, and it's in better shape now than it's been in 100 years for the salmon. But our fish have to swim through Puget Sound twice, as juveniles going out, as adults coming back. And so they're experiencing what other communities are doing or not doing for the environment and for Puget Sound and for salmon. And so we need to have what we've created in the Nisqually, a watershed community, be created throughout Puget Sound to have a Puget Sound community. So we're all pulling in the right direction. And, you know, to be really honest with you, it's going to take some level of sacrifice if we're going to make this work. If we're going to have urban centers living in places where we're going to have wild fish, it's going to take some sacrifice. And we can do it. The fact that we're talking today on Zoom during a pandemic shows that when we understand what a problem is, we're able to take really important steps. We can stay in our homes for a long period of time. I went almost a year without seeing my friend Willie because of the pandemic. And so we can do amazing things. We can pull together and do it. And I know we can do it for salmon as well. We just have to make it happen. So I'm hopeful that we can reach out to folks across Puget Sound and form this bigger watershed community and really take on the things necessary for salmon and ultimately for us and for killer whales.
And I think it's about having those allies like, you know, Cindy, Susan, your group. You know, I think it's important to, you know, be open for tribes to working with non-natives. You know, there's a lot more allies out there than enemies, you know, and I think one of the things we're always trying to do is educate folks about fishing and why it's so important. And, you know, I there's still that perception out there that Indians catch all the fish, and that's not even close to being true. So it's always good to continue educating and talking with you today. You know, you can pass on some of these stories that you're hearing from us and, you know, show the video to the festival this weekend. And I think that's important because we're able to educate folks on Zoom now. You know, sitting here talking to you folks on the computer. I mean, who would have ever thought at the beginning of 2020 this is what we'd be doing? Here we are a year and a half later.
That was the most enjoyable 45 minutes I've had with two people in a long time. And I really look forward to doing more with them and getting the word out about the good work they've done and the good work we can do together. I think after a lot of the really depressing things we shared this morning, that this is such a wonderful, hopeful, inspirational interview to watch. I remember when I first moved to Washington and to Olympia in the early 80s, I remember seeing T-shirts in a store saying "Save the Nisqually," and I was like, "What is the Nisqually?" I had no clue. I just moved there, and since then, watched as all the amazing efforts, the purchase of that farm that took decades. I remember a time when that we just didn't think that was ever going to happen, and the dike would never come down, and it's down. That whole estuary is restored, and they're talking. They're going to move I-5. I mean, there's always reasons why we don't do these things, but the Nisqually have shown us how these things can be done. And Billy Frank Jr. was he was such a kind person, but very passionate and very driven to make things better. And even after being jailed and not treated very well, he learned how to work with the leaders of our white society and the tribes and get them working together to make change. And his legacy will live on forever. And it's just wonderful seeing that those efforts continued now and into the future. So that's just such an inspirational story. And I have to share one of the things they were joking about when we first got on the interview was how Willie grew up with David. And when, he was just a young kid, and David was laughing, saying, yeah, we used to go to breakfast and I would help cut Willie's pancakes for him. And now he's the chairman and he's my boss. And so it's wonderful to see someone like David who has dedicated his life to working with Billy and now Willie and with the Nisqually to save the salmon and to do such amazing work with the habitat and restoration projects there. So just want to really thank the two of them for taking time out of their busy schedules for sharing all this. So next we have a short video about an upcoming action that some of you may want to weigh in on as well up in Canada. This is testimony about the Roberts Bank terminal that they are looking at adding up in BC. And members from the Lummi, Suquamish, and Tulalip went up to testify. They were starting to move forward with it and now have paused it while they're collecting more information and consulting with the Indigenous peoples. These testimonies are very compelling. Let's hope the Canadian government will listen to them. And when we put this all together, we can find some links and post them if you want to take part of that as in helping stop this project as well. So we'll show that video now.
We have a reciprocal relationship with spirit to our lands and waters.
When I was 2 days old, I was in a basket down at the beach while my parents beach seined, when my community members were right down there. I fished with my dad all my life, and we've seen the decline of the salmon. We've seen what pollution, vessel traffic, and degraded spawning grounds have done to our salmon that we sow. That is why we are here. That's been our existence.
The things that we face today are the result of mitigated impacts. Mother Earth can no longer continue to absorb these mitigated impacts. We come here today to talk about a resource that is dwindling, and the impacts that will take place, not just from this project, but the cumulative impacts and what that means to our environment.
What you do here affects us. There is no border. We do not give consent on the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project. No. Bahoy, we draw the line.
And in general, the view of the greater society on Salish Sea seems to be as a transportation corridor, and that's not what it was meant for.
You see in the other room where we have the picture of our canoe, the Tulalip's canoe, along with one of the First Nations canoe with the Kolkola H, with his head up in between them where they were touching him. And thinking what they've done for us in our history over time, they've fed our people. They've drove the fish into the shore when our people were starving. They've thrown seals on our beaches when our people were hungry. They are our brothers.
We've talked with our ancestors. They said there's hope for the Salish Sea. There's hope for Kwethalmachan. There's hope for us. But in order to do that, we have to do the work. We need to stop the stressors, stop the bleeding, figure out what it is and what we can do next to start healing the Salish Sea.
Our culture and our spirituality is essentially our law.
We're here to protect Mother Earth. We're here to protect her species that provide us food for our people. It's not only us, it's for each and every one of you and your children and your grandchildren that are coming behind you.
The ocean doesn't forget. The ocean does not forget. And we surely won't forget. We're going to keep telling this story over and over again. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so how is everyone hanging in there? Have you melted yet? We are down to our last video. We'll end with Swilcanum and doing a song and story from the Tokitai Totem Pole event we did in 2019 in Coopville. So we will let that be the ending. Before I do that, I just wanted to thank all of you for being part of this. Thank our awesome staff, Cindy, Amanda, and Katie, who helped make this happen, to all the Penn Cove Water Festival folks who helped out, and mostly to all of the tribes who have allowed us to interview them or send footage or use videos they have. We've been really honored and thankful to have the chairman and chairwomen of many of our regional tribes. And tomorrow we will be back with, we will have Frances Charles, the chairwoman of the Elwha-Clallam tribe, Lower Elwha-Clallam tribe. We have Leonard Forsman, chairman of the Suquamish. We'll have more from Lummi, Doug James, Jewel, I'm losing my mind. Jewel James, and some more Peter Ali flute music. We're also honored to have Rena Priest from Lummi, who's been part of some of our events in the past, and who this year was just recently named the Washington State Poet Laureate. and she's going to be joining us live tomorrow to read some of her amazing poetry and share that. We have more stories from Rosie and Bill. We have more storytelling from Lula Bombard. Sarah Perdue, who is the native artist Roger Perdue's wife, will talk about his work carving the salmon wheel and the whale wheel, and they'll show more of the native exhibit at the Island County Museum and talk about Roger's art and his generosity in letting the Water Festival use his art for decades. And even at the time of his death, he provided us with a folder of his artwork to use into the future. We also have a wonderful young Haida author, musician, a wonderful woman who lives in Seattle, who will read and sing her book and song, Killer Whale Eyes. That's a wonderful kids book. And we'll have more talk about restoration projects and wonderful actions that are being taken. And tomorrow's focus will be a little bit more on orcas. We tried to divide it into salmon and orcas, and as all things are connected, that's impossible to do. So we've had a little bit of everything today. We hope that you found something that speaks to you and that you can walk away with, maybe with some changes in your mind and your heart and your spirit, and some inspiration to be a part of making things better for the planet and for the salmon and the orcas and the Coast Salish people and for all of us in the future. Thank you again for being part of the day. We'll see you tomorrow, and we'll leave you with this wonderful song and story from Swell Canaan.
I walked up to him at a picnic table where he was eating his cold dinner while they were breaking down the festival. And I said to him, Chattaskatum, which Talem, what did you really mean? Because he spoke from his heart. I knew there was something there. So I said, what did you really mean? We need to listen to the trees. We need to learn from trees like our ancestors did. What could a tree teach me? Without missing a beat, he looked up from his paper plate. He looked me square in the eye, and on that day, Chattaskatum, which Talem said, Swokanum, how long you studied that violin? And I thought that was deep, because all these years as I have studied the violin, I've been learning from a tree. I learned that every line in the grain of the wood is a symbol of a winter survived, that even trees make their mark during the toughest of times. So I told this story in concerts all across the country. I remember one was in Dayton, Ohio, one was in Chicago, one was here on this very stage. One of the first times I told that story was here on this very stage. And then I told the story down at the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco, and I went down to Japan and Korea, and that's like a whole different country down there. I came back home to the Lummi Indian Reservation. I was telling the story one more time in the community center there, and I was telling the story because Chattaskatum, which Talem was sitting in the front row. I wanted him to know I'm a good young man, that I listened to my elders. But Chattaskatum, which Talem interrupted me that day. He said, Swokanum! Swokanum! And I said, yes, Chattaskatum, which Talem? And he said, my hearing aid, it was turned down that day. I really just wanted to know how long you studied violin. I thought that was deep. He took me up to an old growth forest up near Mount Bakery. He took me to the base of a tree that was so big we could all fit inside of it. It was huge. He had me look up. I looked up. He said, and I asked him, how tall is this tree? It looks like it goes off into infinity and beyond. And he said, I don't know, it's a couple 100 feet tall, maybe, I don't know. said, what I want you to do here is listen to this tree and tell me what you hear. And so I listened. And I heard the tree go. Cree, 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 cree. Chatiscatum would tail him. He could tell I heard something. So he says to me, Swokano, tell me what you hear. And so I says, Chatiscatum would tail him. All I hear is cree, 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 cree. Chatiscatum which Tatum said, Swokanum, you're listening with your ears. Listen with your heart. Watch the branches. They'll give you a beat to a song. Listen to the wind. Listen to the birds. They'll just play. Your job is to just play along. And so I did. And this is the song that came to me on that day. And actually, I'm going to do a little variation to this piece. I'm going to help you find the beat, find the tempo, but you're going to help me do that too. So if everybody could please just rub your hands together like this, and if you're missing a hand, rub your sleeve or something. So there we go. Or if you don't have hands, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. Listen. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now listen. Listen to the crowd. Listen to the birds. Now, if your birthday is an odd day, you're just like me. My birthday's an odd day. I want you to take 2 fingers and tap your hand against the top of it. Everybody else keep rubbing your hands. Listen to the people. Everybody got to be heard. Is everybody born on an odd day here? Okay. Can you hear it? Now listen to don't listen to your hand. Listen to everybody else's hand. Okay, now everybody take 2 fingers. Keep doing that. we can work together. We really can. It's a beautiful thing. Anybody notice that the violin kind of sounded like more than one instrument there? Isn't that kind of cool, like how that happens? It's like I can play more than one string at a time. Well, won't it be cool when there's a whole symphony of instruments playing that piece? Wouldn't that be cool? We all work together, right? That'd be so neat, like when the Seattle Symphony's gonna do that in the 2020 season in July next year. Yeah, with me, it's gonna be awesome. I don't have an exact date right now, but that is happening. It's the Seattle Symphony's playing my music, and I'm playing with the Seattle Symphony. And they're comparing my music to that of Beethoven, which is kind of strange, because he's dead. So I can talk about him all I want. I'm pretty sure my music's better than his now. But I also want to say this one thing, is that what is our measure of greatness? Is it really what we accomplish or what we're compared to? Or is it our relationship to one another? That we all relate to a love for a beautiful animal, a beautiful human being that you are. I want to encourage you to recognize that you are significant, that no one can be you. No one can feel your feelings. I want to encourage you to keep being human and love all of creation. That when you honor a time like this, like, you may not get this, but this is live, like I'm really here and you're really there and I can see you seeing me with reverence, or the beauty of this place and space, the art that's behind us. That qualitative expression of being is actually what art is. That special way that you are being who you are right now, choosing to be a part of this journey, is an honor to us all. Your special way of being who you are honors us all. Own it. That's more precious than anything that you'll ever have on earth. Owning your life experience and sharing it with others. It was a public school music program that saved my life. For the moment. It's when I realized that my name, Richard Marshall, was illegally changed to take me off the foster care rolls right before the Indian Child Welfare Act. I was born Richard Alfred Wesley Jr. I was blessed by my family to carry the name Swokanum. It's an honor to share that name with you. It's sacred.